The secret she kept while destroying my career. I should have known something was wrong when she started bringing me coffee every morning. Those words still echo in my mind as I sit here, 6 months later, finally ready to tell this story. Because what happened next wasn't just workplace drama. It was a calculated destruction that nearly cost me everything I'd worked for. And the person responsible. Someone I thought was my closest friend. My name is Cassandra Wells, but everyone calls me Cass. I'm 32, a marketing director at Pinnacle Solutions. Or at least I was until everything fell apart. I've always been the type to see the best in people, maybe to a fault. My colleagues used to joke that I could find something positive to say about a root canal. That optimism served me well in my career, until it became my greatest weakness. The story begins 18 months ago when our company hired a new senior marketing specialist. Her name was Theodora Blackwell, Thea to her friends. From the moment she walked into our open concept office with her perfectly styled auburn hair and designer blazer, I knew she was something special. There was an energy about her, a magnetic confidence that drew people in like moths to a flame. "You must be Cassandra," she said, extending a manicured hand toward my desk on her first day. "I've heard so much about you. They say you're the creative genius behind the Henderson campaign." I felt my cheeks flush. The Henderson campaign had been my baby, a complete rebranding for a struggling tech startup that had resulted in a 300% increase in their market visibility. It was the kind of success that had put me on the radar for the creative director position that was opening up in a few months. "Just doing my job," I replied, shaking her hand. Her grip was firm, confident. "Welcome to the team. I have a feeling we're going to be great friends," Thea said with a smile that seemed to light up her entire face. She was right, at least in the beginning. Within a week, Thea had seamlessly integrated herself into our team dynamic. She laughed at all the right jokes during meetings, volunteered for the projects nobody else wanted, and somehow always knew exactly what to say to make everyone feel valued. But it was her attention to me that really caught my notice. Every morning at 8:15 sharp, she'd appear at my desk with 2 cups of coffee, one for her, one for me. Always the same order. Medium roast with a splash of oat milk and a dash of cinnamon, exactly how I liked it. "Thought you might need some fuel for the day," she'd say, settling the cup on my desk with a warm smile. It was a small gesture, but in the chaos of corporate life, those small gestures meant everything. We'd spend the first 15 minutes of each day chatting about everything and nothing. Weekend plans, funny stories from our commutes, dreams for the future. She was easy to talk to, the kind of person who remembered details about conversations from weeks ago and asked follow-up questions that showed she genuinely cared. "You know," she said one morning about 6 weeks into her tenure, "I've worked at a lot of companies, but I've never met anyone quite like you. You have this way of making everyone around you better." "That's sweet of you to say," I replied, though something in her tone made me look up from my computer. There was an intensity in her eyes that seemed almost too earnest. "I mean it," she continued. "The way you handled the Morrison crisis last week. Pure genius. You turned a potential PR nightmare into a showcase for our crisis management capabilities. Not everyone would have thought to pivot like that." The Morrison crisis had indeed been a challenge. A client's product had malfunctioned spectacularly during a live demonstration, and within hours, videos of the failure were trending on social media. Instead of hiding from the attention, I'd suggested we own the moment by creating a humorous response campaign that acknowledged the failure while highlighting how quickly we could help clients bounce back from setbacks. The campaign had gone viral for all the right reasons, thought the senior Zadesso, but "I'm just glad it worked out," I said. "It didn't just work out, it was brilliant," Thea insisted. "You should be proud of yourself. Not everyone has that kind of creative instinct under pressure." Her praise felt genuine, and I found myself looking forward to these morning conversations more than I cared to admit. In an industry where recognition was often sparse and competition was fierce, having someone in your corner who truly appreciated your work was rare. As the weeks turned into months, Thea and I grew closer. We started having lunch together regularly, sometimes venturing beyond the usual sandwich shop to try new restaurants downtown. She was full of stories from her previous jobs, tales of office politics and creative triumphs that always seemed to position her as the unsung hero or the victim of circumstances beyond her control. At my last company, she told me over Thai food one afternoon, I developed an entire social media strategy that increased engagement by 250%. But my boss took all the credit and got promoted based on my work. That's actually why I left. I got tired of people stealing my ideas and not giving me the recognition I deserved. That's terrible, I said, and I meant it. I'd heard similar stories from other colleagues over the years, and it always made my stomach turn. Good thing you're somewhere now where your work will be properly recognized. Exactly, she agreed, twirling pad thai around her fork. I can already tell this place is different. More collaborative. More honest. I nodded, taking comfort in the idea that our workplace culture was as supportive as I'd always believed it to be. It was around this time that rumors about the creative director position started circulating more seriously. The current director, Helen Morrison, had announced her retirement, and the position would be opening up officially in 3 months. It was the opportunity I'd been working toward for the past 4 years, a chance to lead the creative team and have real input on the strategic direction of our campaigns. Have you thought about applying for Helen's position? Thea asked me one day as we walked back from lunch. Of course, I replied. I've been preparing for it for years. I think I have a real shot. You absolutely do, she said enthusiastically. You're the most qualified person here by far. Your portfolio speaks for itself. Her confidence in me was reassuring, especially as the application deadline approached. The process was rigorous. A formal application, a portfolio review, and a final presentation to the executive team. I'd been working on my materials for weeks, refining my portfolio and preparing for every possible question. How's the application coming along? Thea asked one morning, settling my coffee on my desk as usual. Getting there, I said, not looking up from my computer where I was tweaking the layout of my portfolio for the 100th time. Just trying to make sure everything's perfect. Mind if I take a look? Sometimes a fresh pair of eyes can spot things you might miss. I hesitated for just a moment. Sharing work-in-progress materials for such an important opportunity felt vulnerable. But this was Thea, my friend, my daily coffee companion, someone who had consistently supported and encouraged me. If anyone could give me helpful feedback, it was her. Sure, I said, turning my laptop toward her. But it's still pretty rough around the edges. She pulled up a chair next to my desk and spent the next 20 minutes carefully reviewing my portfolio. Her feedback was insightful and constructive. Suggestions for better visual hierarchy, ideas for more compelling case study presentations, thoughts on how to better quantify the results of my campaigns. This is really impressive work, Cass, she said when she finished. But you know what? I think you're being too modest in some of these descriptions. You need to own your successes more boldly. Over the next few days, she continued to offer suggestions and encouragement. She helped me practice my presentation, asking challenging questions and offering feedback on my responses. She even stayed late one evening to help me rehearse, ordering dinner for both of us and turning our conference room into a mock presentation space. You're going to nail this, she assured me as we packed up that night. Helen would be crazy not to recommend you for the position. Her support meant the world to me, and I told her so. I don't know what I would have done without your help these past few weeks, I said as we waited for the elevator. You've been such an amazing friend through all of this. That's what friends are for, she replied, but something in her expression seemed different, more distant than usual. The presentation was scheduled for a Friday morning, and I felt as prepared as I could be. My materials were polished, my talking points were rehearsed, and I had Thea's encouragement ringing in my ears. What could go wrong? Everything as it turned out. The first sign of trouble came Thursday afternoon when I tried to access my portfolio files to do a final review. The folder on our shared server was empty. Completely empty. My heart started racing as I checked my local files. Also gone. It was as if 18 months of work had simply vanished. Technical difficulties? Asked a voice behind me. I turned to see Thea approaching my desk, her expression concerned. My portfolio, I said, trying to keep the panic out of my voice. All my files are gone. Everything. Oh no, she said, genuine worry in her voice. Have you tried checking your backup drives? Had, of course. Checked everything. Somehow, every trace of my portfolio materials had disappeared from our system. I spent the entire evening trying to reconstruct what I could from memory and scattered email attachments, but it was hopeless. 18 months of carefully curated work, refined with Thea's help over the past several weeks, was simply gone. I barely slept that night, and Friday morning arrived with all the enthusiasm of a funeral march. I walked into the office with a hastily assembled presentation that was a pale shadow of what I'd prepared. My confidence was shattered, and it showed. The presentation was a disaster. I stumbled over my talking points. My case studies lacked the compelling details I'd originally included, and I could see the disappointment in the executive team's faces as I struggled through my materials. Helen Morrison herself looked genuinely sad for me, which somehow made it worse. "Thank you, Cassandra," said James Wellington, our VP of Marketing, when I finally finished. "We'll be in touch about next steps." I knew that tone. It was the sound of a door closing. As I gathered my materials and left the conference room, I felt like I was walking through a fog. 4 years of preparation gone. My dream job slipping away. I made it back to my desk and slumped into my chair, staring blankly at my computer screen. "How did it go?" Thea asked, appearing beside my desk with her usual morning coffee. I couldn't even bring myself to answer. I just shook my head and felt tears threatening to spill over. "Oh, Cass," she said, setting the coffee down and placing a comforting hand on my shoulder. "I'm sure it wasn't as bad as you think. But it was. And it was about to get worse." The following Monday, James Wellington called an all-hands meeting to make an announcement. "I'm pleased to announce that we've filled the creative director position," he said, standing at the front of our main conference room. "The role will be going to someone who demonstrated exceptional creative vision and strategic thinking during the interview process." My stomach dropped. I knew it wasn't me. The weekend had given me time to process the reality of my failed presentation. But I was curious to see who they'd chosen. Maybe someone from outside the company, someone with more experience than I had. Please join me in congratulating Theodora Blackwell on her promotion to creative director. The world tilted sideways. Thea rose from her seat across the room, accepting congratulations and handshakes from colleagues with the same warm smile she'd given me every morning for the past several months. She looked confident, radiant even, like someone who'd just achieved exactly what she'd been planning all along. Thea presented an exceptional portfolio showcasing her creative range and strategic thinking, James continued. Her presentation was particularly impressive. Comprehensive case studies, innovative campaign concepts, and a clear vision for the future of our creative department. The words felt like physical blows. Comprehensive case studies, innovative campaign concepts, clear vision for the future. All the things my presentation had lacked after my files disappeared. I sat frozen in my chair as the meeting concluded and people began to disperse. Thea made her way through the crowd, accepting congratulations from everyone she passed. When she reached my area, she stopped. "Cass, I'm so sorry about how things worked out," she said, her voice carefully pitched for sympathy. "I know how much you wanted this position." I stared at her, unable to process what I was feeling. "How?" was all I managed to say. "How what? How did you? When did you even apply?" Her expression shifted slightly, becoming more guarded. "I submitted my application a few weeks ago. I wasn't sure I was ready for it, but some people encouraged me to go for it. Few weeks ago, while she'd been helping me with my portfolio, while she'd been encouraging me and telling me I was perfect for the job, while she'd been bringing me coffee every morning and positioning herself as my closest ally. The pieces started falling into place, each realization hitting me like a slap. "Your presentation," I said slowly. "What did it include?" "Oh, the usual stuff," she said, but she was already backing away slightly. "Case studies from my previous work, some new campaign concepts I'd been developing. From your previous work? Mostly yes. Though I did incorporate some insights I'd gained from observing successful campaigns here. She paused, and for just a moment her mask slipped. There was something cold in her eyes, something calculating. You know how it is. You learn from the best. That night I went home and did something I probably should have done months earlier. I researched Theodora Blackwell. What I found made my blood run cold. There was no record of her at the company she'd claimed to work for. The campaigns she described as her own successes either didn't exist or had been created by other people. Her LinkedIn profile, which I'd never thought to examine closely, was filled with exaggerations and outright fabrications. But more damning than any of that was what I found in her actual work history. 3 companies over the past 5 years. At each one, she'd been hired as a mid-level employee, befriended a senior colleague who was up for promotion, and then somehow landed that promotion herself while her colleague was passed over. The pattern was identical every time. Build trust. Gain access to materials and information. Sabotage the competition. Profit. I was just the latest mark in a long line of victims. The next morning, Thea didn't bring me coffee. She was too busy settling into her new office, the one that should have been mine. But I was waiting for her when she arrived. We need to talk, I said. She looked at me with an expression of mild concern, like she was dealing with a difficult client. Of course, Cass. What's on your mind? I know what you did. I'm not sure what you mean. The files, Thea. My portfolio files. They didn't just disappear on their own. Her face remained perfectly composed, but I caught the slightest tightening around her eyes. That's a serious accusation, Cass. Are you sure you want to go down this road? I found your real employment history, I continued. Pinnacle isn't the first place you've pulled this stunt. How many careers have you destroyed? For a moment we just stared at each other. Then, slowly, her carefully maintained facade began to crack. The warm, supportive friend I thought I'd known disappeared, replaced by someone cold and calculating. You know what your problem is, Cass, she said, her voice taking on a sharp edge I'd never heard before. You're too trusting. Too naive. You actually believed that someone would help you out of the goodness of their heart, with no agenda of their own. So you admit it. I admit to being smarter than you, she replied. I saw an opportunity and I took it. That's how the world works. The strong survive and the weak get stepped on. By stealing my work. By sabotaging me. She laughed, and it was nothing like the warm laugh I'd heard so many times over our morning coffees. Your work. Cass, you were never going to get that promotion anyway. You're too soft, too collaborative. You think success comes from being nice and playing by the rules. I did you a favor by showing you how naive that thinking is. I felt something inside me shift, a core of steel I didn't know I possessed. We'll see about that. He smirked. What are you going to do? Run to HR with your conspiracy theories. Tell them the mean girl stole your homework. You have no proof of anything. She was right about that. The file deletion had been too clean, too professional. There were no digital fingerprints, no smoking guns. It would be my word against hers. And she was now the creative director while I was just another disappointed employee making excuses. But she'd made one crucial mistake. She'd underestimated me. Over the next few weeks, I watched Thea settle into her new role. She was good at it, I had to admit. All that practice at reading people and manipulating situations served her well in a leadership position. She knew exactly what to say in meetings, how to present ideas in the most compelling light, and how to position herself as indispensable to the company's success. The problem was, most of those ideas weren't actually hers. I started paying closer attention to her work, and I began to notice patterns. A campaign concept that looked suspiciously similar to something I'd sketched out months ago. A strategic framework that bore a striking resemblance to a presentation I'd given the previous year. Little pieces of intellectual property that she'd absorbed during our months of friendship, and was now repurposing as her own innovations. But it wasn't just my work she was stealing from. I started noticing that other team members' ideas had a way of appearing in Thea's presentations with slight modifications and no attribution. She was building her reputation as a creative visionary by systematically pillaging the intellectual contributions of everyone around her. The breakthrough came when I was working late one evening, long after most people had gone home. I was walking past Thea's office when I noticed her door was slightly ajar and her computer was still on. She wasn't there, but she'd left her email client open. I know I shouldn't have looked. I know it was an invasion of privacy and potentially grounds for termination. But after months of watching her steal from me and my colleagues, I felt justified in bending a few rules. What I found was worse than I'd imagined. Buried in her sent folder were dozens of emails to external contacts, friends at other companies, former colleagues, industry connections. In these emails, she was shopping around confidential client information, internal strategic plans, and proprietary campaign concepts. She wasn't just stealing credit for work. She was selling our company's intellectual property to competitors. I took screenshots of everything, my heart pounding as I documented email after email of corporate espionage. This wasn't just workplace politics anymore. This was serious criminal behavior that could destroy our company's reputation and cost people their jobs. But I needed more than screenshots. I needed undeniable proof that would hold up under scrutiny. That's when I remembered something Thea had told me months ago, back when I still thought she was my friend. She'd mentioned that she kept detailed records of all her professional interactions, maintaining files on everyone she worked with to help her remember important details about their projects and preferences. "You never know when information might come in handy," she'd said with a laugh. At the time, I'd thought it was just good organizational practice. Now, I realized it was something much more sinister. If those files still existed, they would contain documentation of her entire scheme, not just at our company, but potentially at her previous employers as well. The next morning, I arrived at the office early and made my way to Thea's office. I knew she typically didn't come in until 9 a.m., giving me about an hour to search for any physical documentation she might have kept. I found it in a locked filing cabinet tucked behind her desk. The lock wasn't particularly sophisticated. A simple key lock that opened easily with a paperclip and some basic lockpicking knowledge I'd picked up from a curious YouTube rabbit hole months earlier. Inside were 3 folders, each labeled with the name of a different company. The third folder was labeled Pinnacle Solutions, and it contained detailed profiles on every member of our team, including me. My hands shook as I read my own profile. It was like looking at myself through the eyes of a predator. Every personal detail I'd shared during our morning coffee talks was there. My career ambitions, my insecurities, my work habits, even notes about my weekend activities and personal relationships. She'd been cataloging everything, building a psychological profile that would help her manipulate me more effectively. But worse than the invasion of privacy were the strategic notes she'd made about how to undermine my chances for the promotion. Steps she'd taken to gain access to my work. Plans for how to sabotage my presentation while positioning herself as the superior candidate. It was all there, documented in her own handwriting like a criminal's confession. The other folders contained similar information about employees at her previous companies, along with copies of stolen intellectual property and correspondence with external contacts about selling confidential information. I photographed everything, then carefully returned the folders to their original positions and relocked the filing cabinet. By the time Thea arrived for work that morning, I was sitting at my desk as if I'd been there all along. But now I had a decision to make. I had the evidence I needed to expose Thea and potentially save my career, but I also knew that revealing how I'd obtained that evidence would likely cost me my job. Corporate whistleblowing was a risky business, even when you were exposing genuine wrongdoing. I decided to start with a conversation with Helen Morrison. She might be retiring, but she still had significant influence within the company, and I trusted her judgment. "Cassandra," she said when I appeared at her office door that afternoon. "Come in. How are you holding up after?" "Well, after everything. Actually, Helen, that's what I wanted to talk to you about. I've discovered some information about Thea Blackwell that I think you need to know." I laid out everything I'd learned, showing her the evidence I'd gathered while being careful not to reveal exactly how I'd obtained some of it. Helen listened intently, her expression growing more serious with each revelation. "This is very troubling," she said when I finished. "If what you're telling me is accurate, we're not just dealing with workplace politics. We're looking at corporate espionage and fraud. What should I do?" Helen was quiet for a long moment, studying the documents I'd shown her. "You need to take this to James Wellington and to HR immediately," she finally said. "But Cassandra, you need to be prepared for the possibility that this might not go the way you hope. Thea has allies in the company now, and admitting they made a mistake in promoting her won't be easy for the executive team." She was right to be cautious. When I presented my evidence to James and our HR director the next day, their initial reaction was skepticism bordering on hostility. "These are very serious accusations, Cassandra," James said, reviewing the documents I'd provided. "Are you absolutely certain about your sources?" "I am. Because if you're wrong about this, or if you've obtained this information through inappropriate means, it could have serious consequences for your own employment." The threat was barely veiled, but I pressed on. "I understand the risks. But I also understand the risks to our company if this behavior continues unchecked." It took 3 days of investigation by our legal team to verify the authenticity of the evidence I'd provided. 3 days during which I barely slept, wondering if I'd just destroyed my own career in pursuit of justice. On the 4th day, James Wellington called another all-hands meeting. "It has come to our attention that there have been serious violations of company policy and potentially criminal behavior by a member of our team," he announced, his face grim. "Effective immediately, Theodora Blackwell has been terminated from her position and escorted from the building. The creative director position will be reopened for applications." The room erupted in surprised murmurs. I caught several colleagues looking in my direction, clearly wondering if I'd had something to do with this sudden reversal. After the meeting, James asked me to stay behind. "Cassandra, I want you to know that the company owes you a debt of gratitude," he said. "Your courage in bringing this information forward has potentially saved us from significant legal and financial exposure. I just did what I thought was right. And that's exactly the kind of integrity we need in our leadership team. I'd like to offer you the creative director position, if you're still interested." I was, of course. But I was also cautious. "What about the application process? The portfolio review? Consider this conversation your interview," he replied with a slight smile. "Your portfolio speaks for itself. We've all seen your work over the past 4 years. And your actions over the past week have demonstrated the kind of character and judgment we need in someone leading our creative team." 3 months later, I was settling into my new office, the one that should have been mine from the beginning. The transition wasn't without its challenges. Some team members were initially suspicious of how I'd obtained the position, and it took time to rebuild trust and establish my leadership credibility. But slowly, things began to improve. The creative team's morale increased as people realized they could share ideas without worrying about having them stolen. Our campaign quality improved as we focused on genuine collaboration rather than internal competition. And our client satisfaction scores reached all-time highs as we delivered more authentic, innovative work. As for Thea, the consequences of her actions extended far beyond losing her job at our company. The evidence I'd uncovered led to a broader investigation that revealed similar patterns of fraud and corporate espionage at her previous employers. She faced both civil lawsuits and criminal charges, and her career in marketing was effectively over. I should have felt vindicated, but mostly I just felt sad. Sad that someone so talented had chosen to build their success on the destruction of others. Sad that I'd been so naive about human nature. Sad that it had taken such a painful experience to teach me important lessons about trust and self-protection. But I also felt grateful. Grateful that I'd found the courage to fight back when it mattered. Grateful for the colleagues who supported me through the ordeal. And grateful for the opportunity to lead a team in a way that prioritized integrity and genuine collaboration. The morning coffee routine never returned to my daily schedule, but I didn't miss it. I'd learned that real friendship isn't built on daily gestures or shared confidences. It's built on mutual respect, honest communication, and a genuine desire to see each other succeed. These days, when new employees join our team, I make sure to welcome them warmly while also maintaining appropriate professional boundaries. I share opportunities and recognition freely, but I also keep careful documentation of my own work and contributions. I've learned that being kind and collaborative doesn't mean being naive or unprotected. The experience with Thea changed me in ways both subtle and profound. I'm still optimistic about people, but I'm also more discerning. I still believe in the power of teamwork and mutual support, but I'm more aware of the signs when someone's support comes with hidden costs. Most importantly, I learned that sometimes the people who seem most supportive are actually the most dangerous. The ones who bring you coffee every morning and remember every detail about your life might be the same ones cataloging your weaknesses and planning your downfall. But I also learned that the truth has a way of surfacing, even when it's buried under layers of manipulation and deceit. And that sometimes, the courage to stand up for yourself and others can transform not just your own situation, but an entire workplace culture. As I write this story, 6 months after that fateful all-hands meeting, I'm happy to report that our creative team is thriving. We've won several industry awards for our recent campaigns, our client retention rate is at an all-time high, and team morale surveys consistently show that people feel valued and respected. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I'd never discovered the truth about Thea. Would she have continued climbing the corporate ladder, leaving a trail of destroyed careers in her wake? Would I have eventually given up on my dreams and settled for a lesser role, convinced that I simply wasn't good enough for leadership? I'll never know for sure, but I'm grateful that I don't have to find out. Because sometimes the most important battles we fight aren't just for ourselves. They're for the principle that merit should matter more than manipulation, and that success built on the destruction of others is no success at all. The coffee at my desk these days is store-bought from the break room, served in a plain white mug with no special additions. But it tastes better than any coffee Thea ever brought me, because it comes with something her coffee never did. The knowledge that I earned my place at this table through my own work, my own integrity, and my own courage to do what was right. And that's a flavor that no amount of cinnamon can improve. Thank you for watching today's video. Please do not forget to like, subscribe and share. It really helps us a lot. Thank you.